Everyone, let me go ahead and start the recording. Record on this computer. All right, I think we're ready to rock and roll. And I'm sorry, we didn't really give Jake a chance to get his bearing before we fired it off.
Straight in the deep end.
Hey, buddy. Yeah, sorry. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Ethereum staking community call number 3. Just to be upfront, we call this the Ethereum staking call because we don't want to only represent reddit.com/r/ETH staker. We want to represent all of the Ethereum stakers, whether or not you join us over at reddit.com/r/ETH staker. Today, our community call features Dave and Jake from Rocket Pool. We have so much interest in Rocket Pool from the ETH staker community. I know Lamboshi and I talk about it every day. Hey, how much are we going to stake solo? How much are we going to stake on Rocket Pool? And we go back and forth. Just so many questions surrounding how it's going to work. The betas have been awesome. We love the product. It's so polished. We think it's going to just be fantastic. But there are just floating questions, curiosities. Where are you guys at now? And we're going to spend maybe about an hour just talking about those. Hopefully we'll get a lot of input from the community. And if you guys would like to begin by introducing yourself, then we'll get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, yeah, big thanks to Superviz and Lamboshi for having us on. I'm Dave from Rocket Pool, the original founder. I pretty much started writing the smart contracts for Rocket Pool back in 2016, believe it or not. So yeah, it's been a big journey to now. We've obviously got a fair bit of excitement this year with testnets popping up for all the clients and whatnot, and we're obviously actively working towards getting something running on a multi-client testnet when that's possible. But yeah, anyway, I'll talk more about that later. Jake, you want to give yourself a quick intro?
Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Jake, and I've been with Rocket Pool for about 2 years now, I think, overall. And most of the stuff I'm doing these days is around smart node stack, so doing a lot of programming in Go for the actual code that the operators will be using to do all the fun stuff, all the validation and things like that. And yeah, thanks for having us, guys.
Our pleasure. Thanks for coming out.
I hope my audio is okay.
So just to make sure we're all
a little bit.
Just to make sure we're all on the same page, can you guys give like a like an elevator pitch of what Rocket Pool is, what you're trying to do?
Yeah, okay, that's pretty easy. So Rocket Pool kind of acts as a matchmaking service between users that want to run a node and users that don't want to run a node, or they don't have the skill set to basically get one up and running, keep it secure. So what we do, we have a smart contract system. So if you want to stake some ETH, and let's say you don't have the 32 ETH required, you can stake ETH in Rocket Pool with as little as 1 ETH. You send that to a smart contract. The smart contract then basically will break these deposits up into something we call a chunk. So a chunk is 4 ETH. It'll then spread these chunks around the node operator network. So if you want to run a node in Rocket Pool, you'll basically set up our smart node stack software on a server. It will then automatically configure your node to receive these deposits from users who aren't running a node themselves, and you'll essentially do the staking for them. So yeah, it basically gives power to people that want to stake, and it has some built-in insurance as well, which is something I'll kind of talk a bit on later, which I don't think there's really any other staking services kind of have this at the moment, but I'll talk more about that later. So the essence of it is kind of a matchmaking service between users that want to stake it, not run a node, and those users who do want to run a node. And there's a lot of moving parts in it, but it is pretty much smart contract based, almost entirely. So, Jake, do you want to put anything in on the pitch? Oh, Jake, can you hear me?
Did we lose Jake?
Hey, sorry.
Jake's.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, Zoom's not great for me. It's breaking up a little bit. I just got you there.
Yeah, dump your video, I think, probably. That'd probably help.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Australian internet is not great. but yeah, that's the essence of it anyway. Well, just Jake sorts out his stuff. So yeah, if you do want to stake and you don't want to run a node or you don't have the 32 ETH required, yeah, you can use Rocket Pool.
Okay, awesome. Do you want me to share my screen maybe, and we can just show off that UI, or do you want to do it?
Yeah, I can share my screen. So
Okay, sounds good.
basically our latest update we put out probably about a week ago, and this revolves around our smart node GUI, so just the graphical user interface. So if you want to run a node in the Rocket Pool network and basically stake your own ETH, and as well as receive these deposits from users who aren't running a node, up until now we've had a kind of command line interface, which has worked really well. We used that in our last beta. You could basically spin up a Docker stack, which is basically the Rocket Pool software. It then configured your node to receive these deposits, and you can create validators and so forth through the command line. But obviously, command line's not for everyone. So yeah, so this is basically a system that sits on top of that and allows you to install Rocket Pool to your local computer or install it to a remote computer quite easily. So I can just do a quick screen share of that. I'll just see if this works. I haven't done this in Zoom before, so I'll just see if I can share this. Okay. All right. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So this is basically the first screen that you'll see when you want to install this software. So it's basically just a thin Electron app, and this app will be installed locally. You'll be able to install this app on Linux, Mac, and Windows. With the first version of this though, you won't be able to install the Rocket Pool software directly onto a local computer if it's Windows. We're basically working around an experimental version to get that happening in the near future. But if you are on Windows initially, you will be able to use this software. You'll be able to run it locally, and you'll be able to install Rocket Pool to remote servers. So, you know, like any kind of cloud-based AWS instance or Google or anything like that. And you'll be able to manage it from your Windows desktop. So anyway, I'll just do it. This may break, so it's entirely possible because it very much is a work in progress. Yeah, so basically, this is the first screen you'd see. You go to install Smart Node. You then basically get the options to install locally or to a remote server. So as I was saying before, you can install this, you know, on remote servers. You know, if you have say 10 remote servers that you're running nodes on, and they're all spread around various cloud providers, just for some redundancy's sake, because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You can actually monitor them all from this one screen. I'll just do a quick test now. I think I've got a server ready to go. Let's say demo server. Okay, let me just grab the details for that. Okay, so that you basically just have to put in your details, a link to your PEM file. So this is basically an encrypted key, which allows you to access your server remotely without having to put in credentials. So you will need one of those in the future. So, but that's that's nitty-gritty details, and they're quite easy to make. So you can actually add the connection, install Rocket Pool now, or you can just add a connection. So if you add a connection, it phones into that server to check that you have administrative rights and so forth. Then there you go. So that's our Rocket Pool demo server there. It's just kind of contacting that server now to make sure everything's okay. And then you get a very basic kind of quick overview of that server status. So it's average load over the last 15 minutes. So you can detect there's any kind of unusual spikes in resources. Obviously a time zone and how long it's been up. So you can basically just monitor it quickly from here. You have the option to obviously install Rocket Pool remotely. So this will install Rocket Pool on that server, or you can just edit it or delete it, whatever. So that's basically a very kind of high level overview of the connections manager screen. So this is, it's also installed to this computer. So you'll see that up here. You can rename any of these instances pretty easily. So yeah, so you can basically just edit the name of the server any way you want as well. And if you want to view the dashboard for this server, so I've already installed Rocket Pool locally on this computer. So if you want to view the dashboard, you just hit that. Oh, whoops, hang on. I just got to take off a redirect and put it in there. This is very much a work in progress, so bear with me for a second. Okay. Oh, hang on, I'll just restart that. Oh, anyway, I forgot to show you the, here we go. Hey, there we go. So this is the main dashboard that you'll see once you've installed it. You'll basically get an overview of your current balances on that server, uptime, and it'll give you a small report on, how things are going on that server. If there's any warnings or anything, basically based around computer resources, like minute pools going down, you'll get a very quick notification of that up here. But everything's great at the moment. So this is obviously your CPU, memory, hard drive kind of reports for the last 5 minutes. You can go back 30 minutes, you can go back 1 week, you can go back 3 days. As long as your server's been up for that long, you'll be able to view the details. This is kind of staking network utilizations for each staking period in Rocket Pool. So we allow you to stake for, the long-term goal is 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. But when we launch, they'll probably be a bit shorter, just because we're breaking the system, and we don't want people staking for 12 months. If there was a potential early issue early on, so that will be changed in the future. But yeah, so you can basically get a very quick overview of your server's resources and the network's resources. You'll be able to view your validators in here. That's not quite finished yet, so I won't jump into that because it's probably going to break. And you can go back to the connections manager screen here, or you can view some more details on your servers. Like if you want to run a remote command on your server securely, you can actually do that from that screen as well. This is basically, up the top here is your balances on that node. So you have your ETH balances, your RETH, and your RPL. So if you want to say, send some of the ETH that's on that server to somewhere else, you just click that. You'll then see your node account and your node contract. Your node contract is a contract that's created specifically for your node when you register it with the Rocket Pool smart contracts. So this is used to basically hold RPL and hold some ETH which you will deposit to create validators with. So your node account is basically the ETH stored on that actual node, not in the node contract, which Rocket Pool can access. So if you wanted to send some ETH from that node account anywhere else, you might want to send it to another account. You might want to send it to another node operator. You can basically do that from here. So all you need to do is just simply put in how much you want to send, an address, and yeah, and then you basically just confirm that, and it gets sent. So yeah, and that basically gives you a transaction that you can view on Etherscan. So that's essentially, if you are running a remote server, obviously it's going to be very hard. Well, if you're not using this, it'd be very hard to send balances which are located on that node somewhere else without having to actually log in there. But you can do that all remotely from here. So that should actually solve a lot of headaches for a lot of people. There's a few other screens I'll just quickly go over because I don't want to spend too long in this because I know there's probably some other questions you guys want to ask. But yeah, so basically with the Rocket Pool service here, there's a whole bunch of other screens which you will see during certain stages of the installation. So let me just reload that. So I think you should see, yeah, so this is basically, so if you want to stop the Rocket Pool service or start it, you can do that from here as well. So this would stop the Docker stack running. So I think I could do that. So and you obviously get a little warning that, Rocket Pool service is going to be stopped, and any staking mini pools, which is our type of validators, will, obviously be penalized for going down for a little bit. You won't lose much, if anything at all, if you're only down for a very short time. It's actually pretty forgiving, that in ETH2. So yeah, you can stop the service. If you need to take it down for maintenance or anything, it'll stop everything in the background, and it'll just basically confirm that everything's okay when that's done. And then you'll be able to start the service again when you've done any kind of server maintenance or anything like that you need to do. And it'll actually automatically start your validators again and everything too. So you don't need to worry too much about that. The Rocket Pool software will handle it all in the background for you. Okay, so yeah, let's just stop there. Let's restart it. Yeah. Anyway, there's a few other screens in here which basically refer to showing you progress of how your nodes are syncing. So if for any reason your node goes down, you do lose some sync progress, this is a screen you'll end up seeing. So this shows you the current status of your ETH clients as they're syncing. Obviously, you can't do much with our software unless you have clients that are synced. So this screen will pop up anytime your nodes fall behind, and you will basically be able to perform any actions once they've caught up again. So you'll see this if you have any kind of significant downtime and your clients need to resync. So anyway, but that's kind of it for. I can show you a bunch more stuff, but I won't drag it on. Yeah, if there's any questions around that kind of stuff, guys, feel free to shout out.
Well, I will say I'm comfortable enough with a command line interface, but that looks a hell of a lot better. That looks lovely.
Yeah, it should make it fairly easy for people to use, I hope. So I'm actually designing this myself. So if anyone has any pointers, feel free to let me know. Oh, and there will be a theme mode too. I must say that. So obviously our color scheme is probably not up to everyone's palette. So we're going to have a kind of a theme manager in there for a dark theme and stuff as well. So I know that matters to a lot of people.
Just to add to what Dave was going over there as well. So the functionality that he's just showed off there in the GUI version, it's basically, so part of our Docker stack is, like the core Rocket Pool CLI, which runs most of the business logic and actually, performs all those actions. So with the CLI version, you'll get roughly the same experience. So depending on what you're comfortable with, you can go one way or the other. The main difference with the GUI version is that has the remote server management stuff, which doesn't exist in the CLI yet. And you've also got the metrics there. So there's a couple of added features over what you would get with the CLI version.
Awesome. Do you guys plan on doing any like Grafana integrations at all?
It is actually running Prometheus in the background. So you'll see those graphs that you saw on the front screen of the GUI app there. That is actually using queries to Prometheus, which is the same way Grafana plugs into it. So yeah, if anyone wants to make a Grafana dashboard for Rocket Pool, that should be very easy to do because all the stuff is already there, ready to go. You just need to basically use the same queries that the GUI is using and build a dashboard in Grafana out of that.
Very cool. That's
I'm
just
so
something
impressed with.
Go ahead, Superface.
Right, the slickness of the display is just so incredible. Like that, I think Limboshi was saying himself. He's used to the command line, but in fact, I regularly prefer. I'd rather manage on the command line, but then I see the smoothness of this interface, and I'm like, I might just rather have that nice interface. So I wondered, slashing is something that I've been dealing with today. I have been on my own quest to be slashed like nobody's business using the Prismatic clients. I've lost 10 of 32 nodes today. Manage. So I know that you all are using subleasing clients, like you're going to use Lighthouse and Prismatic and whoever else. Is there slashing protection built into the stack?
I believe Lighthouse has slashing protection built into their client. I'm not sure about Prismatic. We don't necessarily have it built into Rocket Pool at the moment, basically because we rely on node operators being basically economically bonded. I mean, they have to make a 16 ETH deposit and then they receive 16 ETH from these other users who aren't running a node. So it's basically, we're putting the onus on them to obviously keep, good uptime, keep a secure service so it doesn't get slashed because they stand to suffer just as much as anyone else which is on their node, which is where the whole 16 ETH kind of system came in with too. We don't have any native solutions built into that, but we do actually have some kind of insurance. So in the Rocket Pool network, the node operators obviously have the most to gain. So they will obviously, they can stake their own ETH and they get a higher return than they would outside of it. But in saying that, they do have to perform a good service for the users who are running a node and have ETH assigned to their node. And the way we kind of protected against that in Rocket Pool, where if you have a really dodgy node operator, which your ETH gets assigned to, and like I mentioned earlier too, we do that chunking system where if you have a big deposit, it gets broken up into chunks of 4 ETH inside and then randomly spread around the network. So even if you have a big deposit, only a fraction of your deposit might land on a node operator that's dodgy. But even if that does happen and a fraction of your deposit ends up on a node operator, which is, really terrible and basically has lots of downtime, and they basically get kicked out of ETH2 if they have too much downtime. If that happens for any reason, the Rocket Pool smart contracts will actually give that node operator 16 ETH deposit to the people who are affected on that node as kind of built-in insurance, because that node operator obviously has the most to gain But if they're really, really terrible, they have heaps of downtime, they get kicked out of the system, the users who were on their node, they won't earn any rewards, but they also won't lose any either. So it's kind of a backup insurance system for the users to have confidence that when they do send their deposit to Rockpool, they're not going to lose it all, hopefully. But
that's interesting.
Your original question. Yeah.
As a node operator, I'm like, I'm afraid, like, not to be intentionally dodgy, but it makes me realize that my potential gain will need to be higher than I initially planned to make sure that it covers my risk should my 16 ETH be shared with the people that I was operating for if I somehow failed to operate correctly. Because I'm always thinking about what is my minimum. What's the minimum reward that I'm going to need from Rocket Pool in order to make it worth it? And I'm still very much in flux with that.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. I mean, it's kind of mostly for our users who are staking to have confidence in the system. I mean, if the node operators aren't going to get any deposits, then there's no point them being in Rocket Pool at all. So we kind of do need to give some insurance to the users who aren't running a node that, if they do truly end up on a really terrible node operator, they won't fall too far behind. And now I must say that the node operator's original 16 ETH deposit is only distributed to these users under pretty extreme conditions. If you have a little bit of downtime, and you get penalized just a little bit here and there, that's not going to affect you at all. You won't lose any ETH. It's only if you are down for, say, 18 days in a row and you get kicked out of the ETH2 system, it will actually beat you out at this time if you have too much downtime and you lose too much of your original deposit. Only under that very extreme scenario would it actually give kind of the 16 ETH deposit to the users that run your node. So you have to really, really be a truly terrible, terrible node operator for this to happen. But it is some insurance for those users at least too.
I definitely believe it's the right thing. So.
Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
Oh, sorry. Just on that point about incentives for the node operator as well. I think that's probably something where the dynamic node fee that's just owned by the network comes in. So obviously you want to get that right balance between users being incentivized to stake on the network and the node operators being properly incentivized for their work. And at this stage it's very hard to say what the right balance is in terms of how much of the rewards the operator should. So it collectively gets to vote on, and we should find the optimum point for how much rewards to compensate them for that risk.
Joseph, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, Fizz, you're muted, so I'll ask one. I had a few lined up. One was on auditing and security. I posted in the sidebar. I'll just read it out here. Dave started by mentioning that longer-term locks would be removed for the time being in case of early issues, which begs the question about auditing or any kind of other security measures aside from the insurance mechanism. What kind of reviews have been done of any related code, and are you able to say who's at work on those, if any?
Yeah, absolutely. No, great question. We probably get asked this quite a bit actually, and completely understandable. In the way of audits are going, we're actually going to have pretty significant audits and possibly a bug bounty later on. The audits that we're going to get done are obviously going to be very significant. I mean, we have to have the smart contracts audited, we have to have the node software audited. So that's going to be pretty significant. We're still doing some minor changes, things here and there at the moment. So we're not going to get any audits done until these changes are in place, until we've run our next beta. Obviously, if we need to make any significant changes and we've had audits done previously, we will need to get them re-audited. So we're going to wait till we have a feature lockdown after the next beta. Once that happens, only minor fixes and stuff, urgent fixes will be incorporated into the smart contracts. It'll basically be locked down from that point on. Then audits will happen, possibly another beta. And so hopefully there will be significant audits, and we won't obviously launch until we're 110% happy with that. That's probably our main thing. Even if we do launch later than we want to, that's perfectly fine. We're basically not going to launch until we are 110% sure everything's locked down. As for who's going to do the audits, we've got a couple of people in mind. We're actually going to be shopping around for some audit quotes quite soon. We have, obviously, Consensus is invested in Rocket Pool, so they actually have their own due diligence section, so we may get them. Also, Lighthouse, who is created by Sigma Prime, are also auditors as well, and they're in the same time zone as us, which is actually really super handy. And those guys are super switched on. I mean, they know ETH2 better than anyone else. So them auditing Rocket Pool would actually be a really kind of a huge boon for us, since they are so familiar with ETH2 as it is. So we'll probably end up getting a few quotes, but I reckon it'll probably end up being one of those two entities that actually ends up doing our audits in a few months' time, when we're basically locked down all the features.
All right. So Phil had a good question up above too. Let me scroll up, and just about key management and who has control of what. So is it the node operator that has control over all 32 ETH, or is it Rocket Pool, or how freely can those keys be shipped around?
So the validator key for
I'll let
doing proposals and attestation, that's handled by the smart node software, and that's stored locally on the node operator's node. So they have complete control over all the validator functionality. But at this stage, the withdrawal key that's an aggregate key composed of keys held by Rocket Pool and some other trusted third parties, which is that's kind of the pattern at the moment. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure if you guys can still hear me. My connection's
you're breaking up a little bit. Kind of.
Sorry, I'll keep going. So basically, when phase 2 of the ETH2 rollout comes around, we'll be able to do withdrawals from the beacon chain directly to smart contracts on shards, and that means that we can handle distributing what's back to everybody in a perfectly trustless way. But until then, for phase 0 and 1, while we're operating, Rocket Pool, a combination of ourselves and some trusted third parties like investors and stuff like that, will be collectively holding the withdrawal keys, and we'll all need to sign withdrawal messages to get that the beacon chain ether onto a contract, and we'll kind of handle disbursement to all the stakers and the node operators via a token which we're using for rewards in phase 0 and 1 called RETH. So essentially, in the first first 2 phases of the rollout, everyone's earning rewards in RETH, and then we perform the withdrawals from the beacon chain for the beacon chain ether. Then the RETH is traded back in for the beacon chain ether, which it's backed by.
Okay, here's a follow-up one.
Oh, sorry.
So it'll be quick. Do you guys have any speculations on what our ETH will be worth compared to ETH?
I'd probably say it would be worth slightly less than 1 ETH, because there is obviously the gap in time between phase 0 and phase 2, and obviously that needs to be taken into account. So obviously it won't trade 1 to 1, at least in my opinion. Probably a little bit less.
0.9? That would be my guess. 0.9.
That's very specific.
Yeah, but I think it obviously anything at this stage is just pure speculation, but I think it's going to trade somewhere between essentially the inverse of the amount of interest that is earned on the beacon chains. If collectively validators are earning an average of 5% interest, then the inverse of that is 0.952 or something. I think it'll be somewhere between that and 1 ETH, because if people have been staking, they're not going to want to sell it at a loss, most likely, unless they really need cash fast or something like that. And obviously, you wouldn't pay more than 1 ETH for it. So I think it'll be somewhere in that area, towards 1 somewhere, but less than 1.
It's a much smarter answer than mine. Gut feeling. Guess. Okay, someone in the chat wants to know, when is the next beta? Are you guys planning to join up to the multi-client testnet when that goes live soon?
Yeah, we're basically holding back at this point. Obviously, we want to finish off the GUI. It still has a few sections which need to be completed and polished. That's probably going to be the focus of our next beta. It is basically integration of that on top of the stack. So obviously that needs to be completed first, and hopefully that should kind of wrap up within about a month's time. I'd say there's probably going to be a multi-client testnet in the near future. So yeah, we're probably just going to launch straight onto that for our next beta. Originally, we had planned to possibly do our own testnet again, like we did for the last one. But obviously, if there's a multi-client testnet running, yeah, we'll naturally go straight to that.
All right, sounds good to me. So what do you guys have, or will you have, as far as like failover options go? Is there an oh shit button? We can ship validators off elsewhere?
Yeah, we have a number of settings in the contracts, which anyone can see. They're all open source, where we could essentially stop deposits. You know, if something immediately goes wrong, we can halt the whole system, allow node operators to withdraw, and so forth. So yeah, we do kind of have that ability to shut everything down if we need to, and that can be done quite quickly. Obviously, if there's any massive issues, yeah, which hopefully there won't be. But yeah, we do have that ability.
And also on a more like personal level, like if my server goes down, can I ship my validators off to Superfizz if he's also running a node? Is that something that's going to be possible? Or maybe ship them over to AWS or something like that?
You can, I'll let Jake fill this one, but you can export your keys. So Jake, do you want to fill it?
Yeah, so Rocket Pool, like we won't directly, I think, you know, be providing infrastructure for that, just due to the decentralized nature of the project. That's like a fairly custodial sort of pattern. So we wouldn't be looking at providing something like that ourselves. But I think that's something that the node operators can manage themselves like fairly trivially. So say you've got like your node running at home, and you want to just, you know, have some backup to, you know, to switch everything to in case like something happens to your connection or your computer catches fire or whatever. So you can quite easily just set up a like an instance on a cloud hosting provider and, you know, install the Rocket Pool stack on that and basically just keep the ETH1 and ETH2 nodes up to sync. ETH1 you could use in Fura if you like. So it's really mostly just about keeping an ETH2 node synced, just to avoid any downtime if you do need to switch onto it. There's an important note there where, like, if you've got a redundant setup, you definitely don't want to have your validator keys on multiple computers at the same time because you might get yourself slashed. So don't do that. But, you know, on your node at home, you would just back up your validator keys. Hopefully at some point we will have HD key derivation for BLS keys. At the moment, I haven't seen any of that out in the wild, but as soon as that exists, you know, we'll definitely look at implementing that. So for now, you know, it's basically every time you create a mini pool, you back up your validator keys, and then if anything goes wrong, you just, you know, turn off Rocket Pool on your computer at home, get onto that cloud hosted instance. So as long as you've been keeping synced, it's all ready to go. If not, if you do need to do a sync, the penalties for downtime aren't really that severe. They're pretty manageable. So you just switch onto that and then put your validator keys onto that machine and, you know, you're ready to go. So, you know, it's not really something that we need to interfere with directly that much ourselves. And like, obviously we'll have guides for, you know, how to keep these redundant setups going, you know, just so people know the best practices for this sort of thing.
I've got a couple of follow-ups.
That's great.
Oh, sorry, Fizz, go ahead.
Oh, sure. I was going to point out, I like it made sense to me to take a validator down, but it's a great idea to just leave them up on one machine at a time. And I'll go ahead and let you finish your question.
Yeah, well, one quick follow-up to the first one, and I'll move on to another if that's okay. Regarding funding, you mentioned that I think it was Lighthouse that you had some relationship with, and Consensus had done some other work. But audits can get pricey. Are you guys okay in that area, or had you considered applying elsewhere in terms of grant-related funding, like the ETH Foundation's Ecosystem Support Program, among others?
Yeah, we should be okay in that regard. Obviously, we've been running for quite a while, so our runway has had it extended. So originally, we built Rocket Pool for the first version of ETH2, which was a smart contract version of staking. So obviously, we had to, you know, kind of hit the reset button in that regard. So we've had some small investment from Consensus, and that should get us through past the audits phase, and our runway is quite a bit. So yeah, we're doing okay. We're actually relatively a small project as well. It's it's Jake and I pretty much doing the lion's share of the work at the moment, and we occasionally outsource some work, any kind of contract related stuff. But yeah, at the moment, we're doing pretty well. We also have, I think, about 12% of the original RPL stash from the original token sale, which was a few years ago at this point. So that should easily pay for audits too if we need to at this point as well. So yeah, we're actually looking okay in that regard.
Yeah, that's great. And the other question was something that's interesting to a lot of people is a direct delegation option. Obviously, this isn't a DPoS system. So many others are, but the option for them will exist if people build them. They could run their own validators, or you could delegate. So here, from what I'm hearing, and I'm new to Rocket Pool, but you're sort of randomly distributed to some number of different validators. But is it possible in the future to see an option where people with high levels of reputation, verifiable security, and a track record might be able to sort of find themselves featured or have the ability for people to delegate directly to trusted parties, people that they know aren't running on, say, AWS, where you'd face a slash if there were downtime, and so on?
Yeah, that's a really great question. We've actually I was actually talking to a staking as a service provider quite recently about this. Originally, currently we kind of treat every node operator equally, and this is to prevent gaming the system to some degree. The minute you start elevating some node operators over others, can result in gaming, collusion, and a few other things in the network. So that's essentially why we treat everyone on the same level and basically sample them randomly. I do actually think there might be a possibility for something like this in the future, because we do have a number of staking as service providers who are looking at running some Rocket Pool nodes themselves, and which they'll have their own customers ETH staked on these nodes. So, and they also want the ability for any ETH coming through the front door to select their nodes to be staked on if they're their customers. So that's actually an open discussion I'm having at the moment. Originally, my gut feeling is just keep it as is and treat everyone equally. But there could be a demand for this kind of possibility. So there is a possibility for that to possibly happen in the future, based on demand.
Okay. Can I clarify? I was under the impression that that branded staking or staking with your cohort was something that had been accepted, but you're saying that's still up in the air. Is that right?
Oh, no. So at the moment, you have the ability to register a group in the network. So this is basically, if you're an exchange or a wallet provider and you want your users ETH staked in the Rocket Pool network or done in the background, like they never know that Rocket Pool is doing it. It's basically a decentralized infrastructure service for staking. So yeah, they can basically create a group in the Rocket Pool network smart contracts. They then get an ID, and then any deposit that's sent into Rocket Pool is their group ID is supplied along with it, and they can then track these deposits and withdraw them in and out of Rocket Pool using their own smart contracts, and then funnel them back to their users that way. So that way, the node operators are still doing the staking for these users, but obviously they can't select which node operators are going to be doing the staking. So yeah, that's kind of a different system in that regard. But yeah, I think Joseph was asking basically if certain node operators can be selected to do the staking for this ETH that comes in through the front door, be that through a group or just anyone else. So we don't.
And that was my understanding. I had sort of said to my friends, "Hey, join my group. I'll stake your ETH on my server through Rocket Pool." But that's not that they could join my group, but their stake would still be distributed throughout the system. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. That's how it is at the moment. That's basically
right.
a security mechanism. Yeah.
I think just to add on top of that as well, it's also just part of our UX for onboarding regular users onto Rocket Pool. Like a lot of these delegated proof of stake kind of systems, there's a reasonably high barrier to entry where you need to do a bit of research about what constitutes a good validator. You've got to review all the validators in the marketplace and pick one. we've tried to like significantly lower that barrier. So it's about, you know, as a regular user, it's just fire and forget. You put your deposit into the queue and then you're good to go. You know, like it's like this will get assigned to a node and everyone's off to the races.
Yeah. Again, to add to that, like decentralization is obviously a major priority for us. So if we start elevating some nodes over other nodes, you know, because be it a reputation-based system or something like that, that can actually lead to pretty severe centralization. If you have some node operators that, you know, have a really good reputation, they could end up getting the lion's share of ETH from Rocket Pool. And then you have all these other little node operators, you know, running a laptop, you know, in their granny's basement or something like that, that aren't getting any deposits because they've only just joined the system and they don't have any reputation. So that can actually spiral into centralization pretty quickly if you don't kind of treat all node operators equally.
It's definitely like an interesting discussion to have though. So, and like it's good to hear feedback on this stuff. So if that's like a feature that a lot of people want, keep being vocal about it for sure. Because if it's what people want, I expect, you know, that might be added at some point in the future.
I feel like
for sure.
the design as you have it is superior to the design that I understood. It seemed like a neat feature to say, you know, my friends trust me. I'm sorry they do this, but they trust me more than they trust the rest of the networks. They're like, hey man, I trust you to stake for me on Rocket Pool, but I don't trust everyone else. But regardless of my perception, I do think that your design is superior to that perception.
So yeah, and that's also part of the reason why we have that 16 ETH deposit that the node operator has to make. So obviously they get to stake their own ETH and, you know, get a fee as well, so they get a bigger return. But it also keeps them motivated to stay online because they suffer just as much as anyone else that has a deposit assigned to their node. So it kind of works out in that regard too. So you can kind of, I hate to use the dirty word trust, but you can kind of trust these node operators to perform in your best interest as well as theirs.
And if they get slashed or penalized severely, they take basically all of that penalty, right?
Yeah, well, not in the case of slashing, because in case of slashing, all that ETH is pretty much gone. So you have to do something really, really severe to get slashed, most likely intentionally. It's only really in the case of severe leakage that these users basically get refunded out of the node operator's original deposit.
Okay.
But in saying that, the way Rocket Pool works, the way it distributes these chunks of ETH around the network means only even if part of your deposit ends up on a node operator that gets slashed, you're not going to lose all your deposit. You're only going to lose a fraction of it. If it was more than 4 ETH at least, if it was only 1 ETH and that ends up on a dodgy node operator that gets slashed, then yeah, you're kind of out of luck in that regard.
Right. Okay.
What is the least amount of ETH that a node operator can put themselves can put in themselves, and what is the most amount, the highest amount that they could find themselves in, not directly in control of, but sort of responsible for? It's really a question on thinking about attack vectors and whether or not somebody might try and play games in terms of market manipulation. They might put up 16 ETH as a security deposit, but end up with hundreds or thousands of ETH allocated in terms of different different validators spread around. And if they were bad actors and they wanted to see that ETH burned, but short markets, you know, could they try to game the system that way?
Yeah, so basically just to add that, 116 ETH deposit is required per validator. So you can't simply just make 116 ETH deposit and then get like 1,000 ETH assigned to you from Rocket Pool. You'll only get 16 ETH to match that original deposit.
It
so
must be half of the validator. Got it.
Yeah,
exactly.
So you're basically you'll always have half of the ETH will be your own from the node operator. That's essentially to keep them honest. Like if they made a 16 ETH deposit and then we signed them 1,000 ETH, that node operator could easily be malicious and just not care about that 16 ETH and just everyone slash because I hate Rocket Pool. So that would obviously be a really bad scenario. So you're essentially economically bonded in that regard. So you get to stake your own ETH. This is where staking as a service providers kind of finding Rocket Pool as an attractive option to stake their own users' ETH, because if they run nodes in our network, they'll essentially get a higher return than they would out of, and that's in their kind of, obviously, their investors' best interest. So yeah, we kind of have a talk to a few of those at the moment. So we should have plenty of nodes to accept deposits from these users who aren't running nodes. And we actually also have another system built into that acts kind of a redundancy measure. So we have lots of redundancy stuff in Rocket Pool. It's a little crazy. So if, let's say Rocket Pool is getting heaps and heaps and heaps of deposits coming in through the front door, but there's not as many node operators coming online to accommodate those deposits with their own 16 ETH. In that regard, we actually have a fallover mechanism called a trusted node. Now, a trusted node is a node that we basically know who's running it. So this would probably be us or consensus or anything like that. Trusted nodes aren't required to make this 16 ETH deposit. So they can basically create validators to accommodate this extra demand in the Rocket Pool network. In saying that, they are always picked last for deposit assignment. So the second, an untrusted node makes another 16 ETH deposit in the network, they will always get picked for the next deposit from these users. So these kind of trusted nodes act as a fallover mechanism for when the network gets really, really popular, has a lot of ETH coming in the front door, but not enough node operators to stake for it. And they aren't economically bonded in that regard because we know who's running them. So they're essentially a backup mechanism for when the network gets too popular, if it does.
So I got another.
I'd like to, sorry, do you want to read Philippe's questions? Or did you have a? He has two pretty good questions in the chat. If it's okay, I'll read one and then you can.
The bookkeeping, and if done on ETH1, how do you get data from ETH2 into ETH1? Respectively, how is your Oracle solution for getting data about node?
Okay, that's actually a really good timing of a question. So those trusted nodes that I just mentioned that act as a fallover mechanism for when the network gets too popular, they actually do a couple other duties. So they act as oracles for beacon chain data, because obviously we can't trust untrusted nodes with this data because there is no bridge between ETH2 and ETH1 at the moment. So these trusted nodes that sit in the network basically report this data and allow untrusted nodes to withdraw or whatnot. And this is where that functionality comes in. It reports the ETH2 data to our smart contracts essentially. So yeah, we also can't trust untrusted nodes with this because they could be malicious, forge their own ETH2 data and so forth. So that's where our Oracle data comes from for the network. So that's only going to obviously be a temporary solution until ETH1 is rolled into ETH2 as a shard. That most likely be phase 2 or later than that. They're actually talking about at the moment about a new mechanism for combining ETH2 and ETH1. But yeah, anyway, that's in the future. So this is pretty much just a temporary measure. We have to use these trust nodes as oracles to report this beacon chain data, but they will be phased out when ETH1 is rolled into ETH2.
And the main responsibility for those is going to be reporting validator status back to the ETH1 chain, specifically to the mini pool contracts. So they'll be watching all the validators associated with Rocket Pool mini pools. And when one of those validators becomes marked as exited, then it's going to update the mini pool status to logged out. Then when the validator becomes withdrawable, so there's like a bit of a delay on the beacon chain between voluntary exit and being able to actually withdraw the deposit, then it's going to mark the mini pool as withdrawn, which means that doesn't mean the validator has had its balance withdrawn yet. It just means that the mini pool is done. So it'll mark the mini pool as withdrawn and then mint an amount of RETH to it equal to the final balance of the validator. So it's essentially saying, here's the final balance of the validator that Rocket Pool will be handling the withdrawal for. We're going to create a matching amount of RETH, put that on the mini pool, and then that can be distributed between the node operator and the users as rewards.
Yeah, and hopefully most of this stuff can be eliminated once ETH1's rolled in ETH2, and there is actually the ability to smart contract
pre-phase 2 stuff.
Yeah.
From interacting with the community, what would you say is the demand for people wanting to run their own nodes and demand for people wanting to have their ETH staked? Is that pretty equal, or is it heavier to one side?
I think the people currently following ETH2 development are people that do want to run nodes in the network, just because they're the most passionate ones. I think you'll find when ETH2 rolls out, and there's obviously a lot of excitement that people can suddenly stake, you will get a lot of questions from people who aren't running nodes that would possibly want to stake their Ether. So I think that'll change in certain flux, but at the moment, I'd say node operators are probably the most vocal, just because they want to try out staking, and they want to run an ETH2 client, they want to run the Rocketpool stack. So they're probably the most vocal at the moment, at least in my opinion.
Okay. Would you say you guys are going to be ready for mainnet Genesis block, or is it still up in the air?
It's probably, it really comes down to security audits. I mean, we're not going to launch a thing until we're 110% satisfied. I know that's, people get pretty excited and whatnot, and we do want to launch, as early as possible in phase 0, but that will only happen when we're 110% happy with the audits. And the audits will be made public, so we're going to focus on transparency in that regard too. But yeah, I mean, only once everything's been audited and we're 110% happy.
And then Phil had another question. How are their incentives aligned so that everybody's not running nodes in the same geopolitical region? I think that's just covered by. Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, that's kind of baked into the beacon chain for sure.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Yeah, so the beacon chain is designed so that slashing and inactivity sort of penalties scale quadratically based on the number of other validators that get penalized in the same sort of rough time period. So, in layman's terms, all that means is that if you're on a cloud hosting provider and, a server farm gets hit and there's hundreds of validators operating on that server farm, they will all get penalized a lot more. Like the penalties get scaled up because, they all get hit at the same time. So the beacon chain's already, sort of telling you not to do that.
Yeah, and just to add on to that too, when you do register a node in the Rocketpool network, you have the option for it to automatically detect your time zone. So you don't have to do this, but by default, I think a lot of people will. Obviously, this doesn't link any personal information back to you. All we have is your node account and the time zone it's located in. And in the last beta, we actually had a network map which showed you where all these nodes in the beta were. So it's actually pretty evident straight up if a lot of Rocketpool is centralized in one area based on the way these node operators register their node if they report their time zone. They don't have to. We're not enforcing it, but I would probably recommend it so you can then at least see where networks, the nodes in the Rocketpool network are concentrated.
I guess the fear while you pull this up is just that, say, everybody's on Azure and Azure has downtime. So I asked a question earlier that had to do with quality node. Let's say Superfizz wanted, this was back to the delegation question, right?
Yeah.
These trusted parties. But I understood the answer on why you may not have wanted folks to be able to choose initially their validator due to risk. But has any thought gone into some sort of middle ground where just as somebody's passing a threshold to become a trusted node, if there are a pool of higher tier, let's say, node providers that have been online, part of the service for a longer period of time, have passed some sort of a validation to show that they're not using cloud service providers, among other things, then you could sort of select into this area, sort of a pool of higher quality nodes so that it doesn't sort of endanger re-centralizing that system.
Yeah, that kind of touches on what we're talking about earlier with the kind of centralization aspect. It is something I definitely want to investigate again because I feel there will probably be some demand for this kind of thing. At least that's what I've heard from some staking service providers so far. But again, we would only implement it if it couldn't result in gaming the network to some degree, which once you start selecting some node operators over other node operators, it opens up a whole can of worms in the way the system can be gamed, and can also lead to centralization. So for now, I think we're just going to stick with the random sampling method. And the chunking method reduces that risk of your deposit being wiped out as well. So let's say that, AWS results in hosting a heap of nodes for ETH2. In Rockpool, only a fraction of your deposit might actually end up on these nodes due to the chunking system and the way it distributes ETH around the network. So there is a possibility for that to happen, but hopefully if you're in Rockpool, only a portion of your deposit would be affected if all of AWS went down. Besides that, if we do start selecting some node operators over the others, you will potentially look at some gaming in the system. So I don't know if chunking is a middle kind of could act as like a middle ground for that if we did start selecting some node operators over others. But that's something we'll definitely look into if there's demand for it. But at the moment, I feel it could probably lead to centralization of the system and some gaming.
And I have one more, and I've actually got to jump off at the top of the hour, but this has been fun. And Fizz, thanks for allowing me in, and I'll watch the rest on YouTube. Last question for me is on centralization. How are trusted nodes selected? And if it's some sort of whitelist approval from the team, sort of a part B, is there any eventual plan to burn keys, keys that might be hosted by the team that would allow you to do things like select those trusted nodes if they are selected by the team, or to shut down contracts rather than token holders performing those actions? Yeah,
so there's kind of two categories to that. Basic settings and stuff in the Rockpool network, like selecting which nodes can operate as a trusted node for that fallover mechanism if the network gets too popular and to act as an oracle for ETH2 data. That's chosen by us as a whitelist. So obviously, if we know the entity that's running that trusted node, that's what makes it trusted. So that could be, Consensus, Rockpool, or any other third party with our network's best interest in mind. So we get to select those because obviously we can't, let anyone else. If we opened up to it like a voting mechanism, that could be gamed and stuff as well. And to touch on to your other one, the smart contract upgrade mechanism. Currently, we have a 2 out of 3 key system, which can upgrade a contract. Now, this is only for testnets, I should add, that we have currently in our repo, because we have a lot of zombie nodes. Basically, in our last 2 betas, people would spin up a node, create a couple of validators, and then just run away just because they've seen how it works. And we'd have all these nodes in the network with no one at the helm, essentially. So in order for us to upgrade contracts and so forth in the betas, we've just used this basic 2 out of 3 key system. The mainnet upgrade mechanism for Rockpool smart contracts will be democratic. So if you're running, basically we will put out a proposal. We'll deploy a contract to mainnet. We will say we want this contract to replace this contract in the Rockpool network, so they can be inspected by anyone basically with mainnet access. The nodes in the network will then have so you have to be a node running a validator. Obviously, if we allow nodes to vote that aren't running a validator, that can be up. That's opening up a whole can of worms because they're not committed to the network. Someone could register a whole bunch of nodes in the Rockpool network and basically sway the vote. So if you are running at least one validator in our network as a node operator, you will basically get the opportunity to vote for this proposal. So we'll obviously have a change log and stuff as well, so you'll be able to see the changes in the contract. If 51% of the node operators in the network with at least one validator running vote for this contract change, it will pass immediately. If 2 weeks passed and no one, if you can also abstain from the vote, so you don't have to vote. But if 2 weeks pass and 51% of the node operators with at least one validator running either vote for it or abstain, it passes. Or if 51% vote against it, it instantly gets dismissed and we have to put up another proposal for a smart contract change. So obviously there's 2 levels there. Changing a whole smart contract in our network is obviously a big thing, and we want that to be very transparent. So hence this kind of democratic voting system where people can view the changes before a contract change is made. But you also have these other minor settings which we have direct control over, such as selecting trusted nodes and forth, because we can't trust that to any other system at the moment.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks for coming out, guys. It's been an hour, so this will wrap it up.
Yeah, well.
But that was great.
you definitely said we're not going to be abrupt, and then he was like abrupt. I'm just teasing. But Dave and Jake, we're so delighted you guys made it out. We already felt really good about Rocket Pool before, but I have to admit, like as we get closer, I'm like, I'm going to probably stick with one of the core clients. I don't want to risk anything, but you guys continually earn my trust over and over. So I'm really looking forward to staking some nodes with you all. And so you've done great work, and we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, well, again, thanks for having us on, guys. We really appreciate having a chat. And it's a bit early here, so I'm going to go grab a coffee now because I'm still a bit tired.
Yeah, thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys.
Yeah,
we'll tune into the next chat as well.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Awesome.
Yeah,
See you,
just
everyone.
jump
Thanks
into
for
Discord,
listening,
anything
everyone.
else.
Bye-bye.